Every time I get on social media, I see stupid comments like, atheism is a religion that believes everything came from nothing, or if you believe in evolution, you think we came from a rock, even though the earth is not just made of rock, and none of the components of the earliest organisms are what any geologist would recognize as a rock. And we don't believe we came from nothing either, because it was never a time when there was just nothing. And a lack of religion is not a religion, just like a rejection of faith is not a faith. And what's especially funny about all of that is that that's what the believers believe. That's their own position. They think that we were conjured out of nothing, essentially, by an incantation of let there be. And basically, abracadabra, where everything poofs out of nothing, except for people, because people, the sacred fables say, were created by a golem spell, so that we're all just magically animated mud. So, in a sense, they believe we came from a rock, but they believe all that, but not us. We don't believe that. But why do believers, defenders of the faith, always lie about atheists? And they lie about our morality and our motivations. They lie about their morality and motivations. They lie about their personal experience, lie about our personal experience. They lie about history. They lie about science. They lie about lying. And they just keep on lying and never admit any significant truth either. I've often said that the heart of the creationism versus evolution issue simply is whether you care what the truth is or whether you're determined to make believe something else instead. Because some believers have confessed to me that they're still going to believe whatever they want to believe, even if they know that it's not true. But they're not going to accept the actual factual reality, and they don't take correction of whatever lies they just told. When called out on any of that and shown the truth of the matter, you'll never get an admission or correction. Instead, they'll change the subject with a whataboutism, or they'll try to project even more of their own faults onto you.
Why are you pointing the finger at other people all the time? Why don't you point the finger at yourself? Do a little more reading, maybe. Less time in court. Maybe that would be effective for you.
Pardon me for saying this, but you seem defensive.
I'm not being defensive. You're the one who's being defensive.
Most often, though, they will just keep on repeating the same lie, as if you never corrected them. Even when you got them cornered, dead to rights, such that they know and that you know and that everyone else knows that they're lying, they'll just keep on lying, no matter how obvious it is. You'll never get a confession or a correction. They just keep lying. And sadly, it's not just in matters of faith versus, reality. It also bleeds into their politics, which I notice is somehow even less rational than religion. Take, for example, Governor Kristi Noem, South Dakota's version of Sarah Palin. Remember when John McCain chose Alaska's Governor Sarah Palin to be his running mate, his pick for vice president? Only she turned out to be so obviously dishonest, cruel, and stupid that she hurt him in the polls? Well, that's Kristi Noem. Sarah Palin was shooting wolves from a helicopter, and Kristi Noem is shooting her own pets because they're happy, and she hates that. She actually said so in her book.
When I got back into my truck, Cricket was sitting in the passenger seat, looking like she had just won the lottery, the picture of pure joy. I hated that dog.
Her book is now being exposed as chock-a-block full of lies, while the puppy killing turned out to be one of the few true stories, and she's still trying to defend that, even though her account of that in the book said that her conduct that day, the day that she shot her dog and one of her goats, that her conduct frightened her family members and her employees. She's still trying to justify that as warranted, even though everyone else that knows her was concerned about it. But to the point about lying, the larger issue, I think, is this lie.
So you write about lessons learned in leadership, and you bring up some specific incidents I want to ask you about. You talk about meeting some world leaders, and one specific one, quote, "I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I've been a children's pastor after all."
So Kristi Noem thinks that dealing with children somehow empowers her to engage against full-grown men, even against ruthless dictators accused of human rights violations and the assassination of multiple of their own family members. If she thinks that that's no different than dealing with a child, That's already laughable. But let's remember that she said that she was a children's pastor. What is a pastor? Now, Kristi Noem doesn't have any formal training in theology, not that it really matters whether she gets a degree in grim fairy tales. Let's just remember what the job of a pastor is. It is to make people believe. Make believe things that are not evidently true, to assert baseless speculation as if it was a matter of fact, or worse, to present what is evidently not true as if it is true, and it's the absolute truth. In other words, the job of a pastor is to lie. Now, by claiming things that are not true, claiming things that are not true as if they are true, and pretending to know things that no one even can know. So pastors, like apologists, are professional liars. So a children's pastor is someone who lies to children. It's a lot easier to lie to children than it is to grown-ups, and somehow Kristi Noem seems to be just now finding that out for the very first time.
You write about North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. You've been questioned several times on this in the last couple of days because you've issued a retraction. You said that it shouldn't have been in the book, this passage, that it was a mistake. Why shouldn't it have been in the book? Is it untrue?
No, what I said is that when this was pointed out, that we made an adjustment to what the content was in the book. I've met many world leaders around the world. I've been to the DMZ. I've been traveling for years and years talking to world leaders. Just that name should not be in the book, and I'm not going to discuss those personal meetings.
Your spokesman told Politico that the world leaders' names were conflated in the book. What does that even mean?
What it means is that I've met with many world leaders, many of them.
Did you meet with Kim Jong Un?
Some of them are in the book, and some of them are not in the book. And that when this was brought to my attention, I immediately took actions and asked to have his name removed.
But why did you remove it? Is it because it's untrue, that passage?
No, this is something that I think I'm not going to talk about. I don't talk about personal meetings with world leaders, and I'm going to continue to stay there.
But clearly, if you're taking it out of the book, it's because it's untrue.
I'm not giving you my answer, no, and that's not the answer. I would say that, this is something that I asked to have adjusted and have the content and that name removed, and that is truly what the action has been.
You said when you learned of it, you immediately took action. You recorded the whole book and the audiobook. You read this whole passage out loud. Why didn't you take it out then when you read the audiobook?
I've traveled for years. I've been involved in policy for almost 30 years. And so I've gone all across the world. I've met with world leaders.
So you didn't realize when you recorded the audiobook?
When it was brought to my attention, and I asked the publisher if they would remove the name, and they did.
Okay, but you didn't answer my question. When you posted pictures and video of yourself recording the audiobook. When you recorded your own audiobook, you didn't notice
I'm
this
not going to
passage?
discuss about my meetings with world leaders.
I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you about recording the audiobook.
Did you want to talk about something else today?
No, I just wanted to know. We're just trying to get a straight answer from it. This has been.
We did. And I took responsibility for it. The buck stops with me. This anecdote I should not have put in the book, and I asked to have it taken out, and it is.
Okay.
When the reporter said, "You're taking it out because it's not true," Noem said, "I've given you my answer, and no, that's not the answer," which is both a dodge of the simple yes or no question and also a lie, because she said that's not the answer. She went on to do a book tour of a bunch of different shows, and they all wanted to know the same simple yes or no answer to this question, which Noem could not admit to because it would mean that she lied, that she made it up. She may have well been to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, but there's no reason to believe that she ever set foot in North Korea, and no reason to believe that she ever met Kim Jong Un. The entire state of South Dakota has a population of less than 1 million people, not even 750,000 people. It's almost entirely rural.
It's a simple question. Did you or did you not meet with Kim Jong Un? And colleague Cole put together this compilation across all these different interviews to this question.
Did you meet Kim Jong Un?
Well, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage. And I've met with many world leaders. I've traveled around the world.
I'm not going to. I don't talk about my conversations with world leaders.
Kim Jong Un. Did you meet him?
I've been to the DMZ. I've been to North Korea.
Answering a question that wasn't asked. Did you meet Kim Jong Un? I went to the DMZ. Okay.
I should not have put that anecdote in the book. That I'm not going to talk about my
anecdote
meetings.
indicates that it happened,
I'm
right?
not. I asked for the content to be changed, and it has been.
Governor, I'm not asking you about the details of this alleged meeting. I'm asking if the meeting actually happened. I don't think it did.
I'm not going to talk about my conversations
You're going to
with world
continue to
leaders.
have to answer this question then.
You made the point to bring him up twice and that he was a little tyrant.
Do you have a question for me, Margaret?
Yes, I do. South Korea is a treaty ally. North Korea is a nuclear-armed adversary. So that's a pretty big thing to confuse.
Now the governor is claiming that she's the victim of a lying mainstream media that's always twisting and manipulating the truth.
When they get caught lying, they call everyone else a liar. Projection. Whatever you're doing, just say that that's what everyone else is doing instead. And that way it's your word against theirs. And that works. Here's how. If you want to steal the election, then when that doesn't work, you get caught. Just say that it was the other side that tried to steal the election, or that they did steal the election if you didn't win, even though you already set that up 7 years ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make a major announcement today. I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters, and to all of the people of the United States, that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
If you want to overturn and bring an end to our constitutional republic, just tell your people that it's the other people trying to do that, and that they'd better fight like hell. And
if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
You have a country now, this one. We don't need to take it back. We've always had it ever since 1776. But if you do fight like hell for him, then you won't have a country anymore. He'll have it. You won't have the Constitution anymore, not the one we have now. You won't even have human rights anymore. But he will have absolute immunity because the conservative majority of justices that he put on the extreme court will give it to him. That's why they have to delay that case until after the election, because if they give it to him now, then Biden would have absolute immunity, and then Biden could just stay president forever. So our now corrupted extreme court wants to wait until after the election, wherein if Biden wins, then of course it goes back to the way it always was, the way it was when Nixon needed a pardon from Ford, because everybody knew that the president was accountable under the law. But if Trump wins, legally or illegally, then the extreme court will grant Trump immunity, and he will be like unto a king. And I don't mean King Charles, I mean like the kings of old, who could do whatever the hell they want.
And tell me, what advice would you offer on the present situation?
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
It was an hour-long speech filled with falsehoods and calls to action. You'll never take back our country with weakness, President Trump told a fired-up crowd at his Save America rally, urging his thousands of followers to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue and fight like hell. Less than an hour later, the first violence at the Capitol. The siege lasts 3 hours, with at least 140 officers injured. 5 people, including Officer Brian Sicknick, would die in the riot or its aftermath.
And if that's not a good look for your party, simply deny that reality too. Gaslight everyone and pretend as if all that violence and death was just enthusiastic tourism.
Officer Hodges, I read your testimony carefully. I hope every American reads your testimony. But I noted that you referred to terrorists or terrorism 15 different times to describe the people who were assaulting officers, dragging them through the crowd, stealing their weapons, smashing them over the head, gouging eyes, and so on. However, some of our colleagues have been calling the violent insurrectionists not terrorists, but tourists. Why do you call the attackers terrorists, and what do you think about our colleagues who think we should call them tourists?
Well, if that's what American tourists are like, I can see why foreign countries don't like American tourists.
Notice that when Kristi Noem lied about meeting Kim Jong Un, she tried to cover that lie up by telling another lie.
On several shows, Noem repeatedly touted her experience.
Oh, I think you need to remember, Margaret, and everybody needs to remember that I've worked on ag policy and federal policy for over 30 years. My time in serving and making policies in this country has been extensive and covered decades. You know, I've traveled for years. I've been involved in policy for almost 30 years.
So you didn't have a conversation with Kim when you were at the DNC?
I don't have conversations about my conversations with world leaders. I've been working on policy for 30 years, Jesse, and that's what most people don't remember about me is I'm old. I'm a mom, I'm a grandma. I've got 3 little grandbabies.
You're not that old.
If Noem is 52 years old, that means she was 22 when she was, in her words, shaping policy, she told Fox News. Noem's political career began 17 years ago when she was elected as a state lawmaker in Pierre. She hit the national stage 13 years ago when she won a seat in Congress.
We're going to continue to talk about that and work real hard to cover the state to make sure that people know who I am and why I'm running.
In one of those interviews where she had already been exposed as a clear and obvious liar, look how she explained herself.
That story's in the book because I want people to know that I'm honest and that when I have difficult jobs, that I take responsibility myself. And I told the truth. And I think that's very different than a lot of politicians that we have today.
What a piece of work. And now she's lying about lying. And it didn't stop there.
Another questionable claim, Noem told interviewers that South Dakota's reservations are a hotbed of activity for the drug cartels.
But we have the cartels set up in South Dakota. And they are set up in South Dakota.
How do you know that?
Because I've seen pictures of them. Our investigators have interacted with them.
Tribal presidents strongly deny this allegation. One tribal leader called it fear-based politics. Both the South Dakota U.S. Attorney's Office and the South Dakota Attorney General's Office failed to confirm the cartels are active in South Dakota.
As a result of that allegation, a number of the local indigenous tribes have banned the governor from as much as 20% of her own state. And now there's a petition of South Dakota's residents calling for Noem's resignation. Way to end a political career. She was this close to being vice president to a 78-year-old fried food fiend who would not likely survive another term, so she was almost president. But now, she's not likely even going to be governor anymore.
The book tour appears to be over more quickly than originally planned. A scheduled appearance on CNN was, in their words, abruptly canceled last night. Fox also reports Noem has canceled an appearance on that network.
According to Fox and other media, Noem's staff blamed the weather for those last-minute cancellations. This morning, she posted on X about snow and thunderstorms in South Dakota, saying she's monitoring the situation and will be ready to respond. But the graphic and radar were already more than 24 hours old when posted.
So why did Kristi Noem tell all those lies?
You know, she says whatever works for her at that moment in time.
Which reminds me, remember Kari Lake, who told the same lie that Donald Trump did about how she really secretly won her race, the gubernatorial race in Arizona, I think it was, but that the election was stolen from her, despite all the evidence of the contrary from Republican judges, officials, and investigators?
You said something last week. You said that there were 740,000 ballots with no chain of custody. Those ballots shouldn't have been counted. Are you really saying that you would throw out the ballots of 740,000,
no,
three-quarters of a million Arizonans? I mean, those were
740,000 ballots violated chain of custody requirements in Maricopa County.
I mean, first of all, it's not true. I mean, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors put out a 98-page report that went through these allegations.
That is a fact. Check your facts.
We took that claim to Maricopa County officials who refuted Lake and pointed to the statement they issued back in May, saying that the county always had control of the ballots, adding they, quote, were sealed in envelopes and secured in boxes that bipartisan couriers are prohibited from opening.
But just to be clear, the Republicans on the Board of Supervisors, the Republican governor, now the Republican candidate for Senate running along with you, the Republican Attorney General under Donald Trump, Bill Barr, all said that there wasn't, that the election was not stolen.
Are we going to sit and litigate this?
No,
I'm happy to do it.
I'm just wondering why they would all lie.
But you guys are obsessed. Well, we have a lot of corruption in this system, and they don't want. I think a lot of people who were responsible for that election know that there were rules broken and laws broken, and they don't want to admit fault. Okay?
Like Bill Barr,
and that's fine. We're going to go forward, and we're going to make sure going forward our elections are secure.
When did she tell that lie? Oh, yes, she was vying to be Trump's pick for vice president. But now she's out and Noem is out. Now who's like next in line? Tim Scott. Let's take a look at Tim Scott, who in the absence of Kristi Noem and Kari Lake has moved in to become one of the top spots in Donald Trump's vice president list. Look how he responds to this question.
Well, Senator, will you commit to accepting the election results of 2024? Bottom line.
At the end of the day, the 47th president of the United States will be President Donald Trump, and I'm excited to get back to low inflation, low unemployment.
Wait, Senator, yes or no? Yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter who wins?
That is my statement.
Notice, Scott does answer this question unambiguously, though he will not verbally admit that the answer is obviously no. He unwittingly admits that by shaking his head.
But is it just yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024?
I look forward to President Trump being the 47th president. Kristen, you could ask him multiple times. But
Senator, just a yes or no answer.
So the American people will make the decision.
But I don't hear you committing
for President Trump. That's clear.
I don't hear you committing to the election results.
Here's the challenge.
Will you commit to accepting the election results?
This is why so many Americans believe that NBC is an extension of the Democrat Party. At the end of the day, I've said what I've said, and I know that the American people, their voices will be heard, and I believe that President Trump will be our next president. It's that simple.
But, Senator, as you know, the hallmark of our democracy is that both candidates agree to a peaceful transfer of power. So I'm asking you, as a potential VP nominee, will you accept to commit to the election results in this election cycle, no matter who wins? Just simply yes or no.
I expect President Trump to win the next election. Listen, I'm not going to answer your hypothetical question when, in fact, I believe the American people are speaking today on the results of the election. And if it continues for the next 6 months, we find ourselves in a great position where we get back to another century of American prosperity. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
So there you have it. Every pick for Republican vice president has to lie. But this isn't news. Remember the last guy?
I've always been interested in origins. Even though my training is in the law and in history, it has ever been an avocation of mine to contemplate and to study the origins of man and of life here on earth. And many theories of origins have been propounded throughout our nation's history. 1859, a sincere biologist returned from the Galapagos Islands and wrote a book entitled The Origins of Species, in which Charles Darwin offered a theory of the origin of species, which we've come to know as evolution. Charles Darwin never thought of evolution as anything other than a theory. He hoped that someday it would be proven by the fossil record, but did not live to see that, nor have we.
I realize that politicians lie, that a lot of them have, most of them probably have. Biden lied decades ago during one of his campaigns, and it cost him. I did not want to vote for Hillary Clinton when I found out about one of her lies, and I hated her husband, Bill, because I knew about a couple of his lies, because I have a higher standard than Republicans do. And I saw what happened to Elizabeth Warren. She was apparently told some family myth about having Native American blood. I've been told a lot of nonsense about my own family's lineage too. But by the time that Warren realized that the people she trusted had duped her since childhood, and that the story was unsupported and therefore indefensible, look how Trump exploited her, as if she was the liar compared to him. All these Republican Veeps or Veep hopefuls have to lie because they're vying for a position alongside the lyingest president in American history, who famously told over 30,000 lies while in office, and who still will not admit the big lie that the election was stolen, even after 60 court cases failed to find any evidence of that, even after his propaganda channel was fined $780 million for repeating that lie, and the CEO of Fox News admitted, as a matter of public record, that he paid his people to lie for Trump. But understand that while the last election was not stolen, even though Trump tried to steal it, he is going to try to steal the next one. And there are several of his supporters who aren't yet in prison who mean to help him do that. And now, a word from our sponsor. This video brought to you by Presidential Pampers. Are you a man of intercontinental incontinence? A dictator unable to dictate when or where your secrets will be leaked? Keep the movement of your criminal documents classified with Presidential Pampers. They mask, or at least enhance, the odor of ass with the odor of ketchup, armpits, and makeup, reflecting the content of your character. Now available in Agent Orange. Presidential Pampers for when you're feeling despotty and need to take an autocrat on the go.